Welcome to Memoir
Welcome.
Church. So this is sort of a special programming. We usually have just one author here on every other month for Memoir Church, and this time we have two. We have Roland Tech, my wonderful colleague, playwright, composer, amazing writer, and myself, Suze Allen, who many of you know, and my best friend from forever, Lisa Stathopoulos, is serving as the guest host in my stead today. So we're really excited to be here and to see you. And so for those of you who are just joining us, this is really about shared stories, about how they grow our humanness and how they grow our empathy and compassion and love and understanding for one another. And that's why I started doing Memoir Church, and it still continues. And every other week, every other month, we do something called Writer's Resistance, where we have 10 or so writers writing on the theme Living in This America. So if you would like to join us, we usually have just a difference of personal essay, memoir stories, and and sometimes poetry and sometimes music. So we'd love for you to join us then for something completely different, but sort of the same. So thank you all for coming, and it's 4:00, so I think we're going to get started. And I would like to introduce to you our guest host for today, Lisa Stathopoulos. She is a recently published two-time author, and her new book, Chimera, A Shapeshifter's Journey, is out, and you can buy it wherever you buy your books. And we'll put something in the chat so you can go ahead and grab it. Lisa, a disclaimer, she and I have been friends for over 40 years, and I got to serve as editor on her book, and it's great to have you here, Lise. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I know
Thanks for
you're.
having me.
And I would like to add Roland Tech, the drama queen. Here he is. And like I said, Roland and I work together quite a bit, and we're taking each other's classes. He's taking my memoir class, and I'm taking his Writer's Container Lab class on Monday nights. And Roland and I have two workshops coming up together that we'll tell you more about afterwards. One is in Oklahoma City with Carrie and Eric, who are here riding in their car. And the other is in Westport, Connecticut at Roland's place. So we'll let you know more about that. But we're just going to start out with talking about writing.
So, I happen to know that these two people, as many of you know, are playwrights and screenwriters. And so I was curious because memoir is a whole other animal. What comes up that's been different for each of you in terms of writing memoir and diving into that, and like what was your starting point? I'm always curious about that. What inspired you to even begin?
Roland, do you want to start?
Sure. So I never thought I was going to write a memoir, but I took Suze's class because I like Suze as a writer and as a teacher, and I was curious. It wasn't until like maybe, several months in that I started to look at what I was writing and think, oh, maybe this could hold together as some kind of a piece. But I'm still finding my way about that. But I would say to answer your question about the difference between script writing, which is sort of my comfort zone, and this is that with script writing, I feel I am diving into the soul and the minds of these characters and trying to let the story unfold through the words that they speak, which is a very limited thing. But I love that limitation. It frees me up in a way. In this kind of writing, I can write whenever I want. And that's a little bit daunting, you know? I can write paragraphs on things. And so it's a little bit like, it can be a little disorienting thinking like, well, what do I leave out? Should I go on and on for 6 paragraphs about this? Is this boring? I don't know. You know, when you're writing a play or a screenplay, the characters won't let you do that, right? And part of the fun of that is that the story has to reveal itself through the things people say and don't say. So
Yeah, I mean, for me, character work, it was always central. That's why I started through theater, because theater is a conversation, and the conversation dialogue is action. And I really love that. And I love the collaboration. You can use lights and you can use set and music and what movement and mask to sort of set that stage. But what I really like about writing memoir, for me, it's a juicy genre, because I feel like I can sort of channel, I can go in and I can see things how they were. I don't have to represent them. I can make them come alive on the page. And that's how I feel like my memories are. They're kind of like a little home movie sometimes. And if I can hit pause and just enter into it and feel everything through my senses, I just think there's a deliciousness. And what I really love about it, which didn't happen to me in playwriting, is that I got a new perspective, because I was dealing with a younger version of me, and I was looking back in this granular kind of way. When you look at it from a different angle, I learn things. So my relationships with people in the past we're healing, you know, we're growing, we're evolving, or I was understanding something that went on. And sometimes I even went, oh, you might have gotten that wrong. That might have been your go, you know? So I really love that about the genre.
Well, that leads into another question maybe for both of you, which is that that whole piece that is about having too much, having so much. Where do you begin? How do you cull? Do you just write and cull later? And also, in doing that, as we all know in our lives, there's people that we might need to write about, or things that happened, unless you know, I don't know, got a magical life going on. But anyways, I mean, it's crap that happens. So how do you write about things and people that you might have to say some hard things about, and how have you dealt with that? And do you write it first and then go back and edit, or, you know, do you feel like your editor's going on as you're writing?
For me, and I think Roland we've talked about this a lot in teaching together, my first draft is always getting in the flow and not analyzing what I have going on. The only editing I do is when I say, oh no, that doesn't feel right. That wasn't the right way to say it. That wasn't the right word. That's not exactly how I felt when that moment. So I'll do some tinkering that way, but just to get the mood right, or the tone of what's going on, or the emotional, content or tension. But I feel like that's all, I have to give myself permission for it to flow. And when you have enough practice at it, you'll understand when you're going down, a little brook that goes off the river and you keep going and going. And then suddenly you're in the forest and you're just like, I got to get back to that river, because this is tangential. So, I think that comes with knowing. And sometimes, though, when you start to go that way and you let yourself, you find the most wonderful, wonderful pools that you can dive in and bring up stones and all kinds of things. What about you, Ra?
So I in working on this piece, I also decided I was going to try to learn Scrivener. And so So I've been using Scrivener, which is new for me. And Scrivener has this feature where you can have going down the left side like an outline. So like you can do as many different little chapters, if you will, or sections or whatever. And you can name each one and then you can look at your list. There's a reason I'm telling you this.
You're being paid by Scrivener?
No. And what I have noticed, which is really interesting, is I will start a new like chapter or section or whatever, thinking I'm going to write about a certain thing. And so I will name it like the yellow house at the top of the road or whatever. And then I start writing, and then invariably I end up somewhere else. And so a lot of my names to things do not correspond. So I have to go back and change. But that's a really interesting thing, because what it's revealing to me is that the act of writing is helping me uncover what it is I'm really interested in about this certain moment in my life or whatever. You know, I start out thinking it's about the yellow house at the top of the hill, but then, oh, lo and behold, it's actually not about that at all. So that's been really interesting for me.
Do you, can I ask you, because this is really great that you just said that. You know how we as people, if you tell the stories of your life, you tell them a certain way
Oh,
and
yeah,
you
yeah,
get
yeah.
used to it, you know, with your
Right.
family. And I was going to ask you if things have surprised you that have come up. And I know this for myself that sometimes, you know, if a memory that you thought was one way, that in your older year, something, I don't know, does it get triggered or whatever, that you realize, oh my God, I totally forgot that guy was there. So I don't know. Did that make any sense? Because I'm
Yeah,
pretty
yeah.
sure it did not.
I mean, I will say,
We'll
I
try
will
to
just,
work with it, Lisa. We'll try to work with it.
I will say that I don't really have the experience so much of like writing something and then going, oh, that guy was there. But I do have the experience of like I'm writing something and I'm recognizing that what I thought that moment meant to me was actually different, that it actually meant something very different than what I thought it meant. And when I discover that, it makes me reconsider how I'm going to begin telling the story, because the way that you work your way into a little vignette or story really has a huge impact on how we take meaning from it, right? So that's really interesting for me to be learning as I go about doing this.
And if I could piggyback on that, I have to say that, you know, the genre memoir is really about meaning. It's different from autobiography, which is this happened, this happened, this happened. It's the telling of events for autobiography, but memoir is really about what happened to you, what you did with it or didn't do about it, and what it meant to you, how it made you feel. So your journey in trying to figure out, and this goes back to another question with you, Lise, that you had also asked, like, how do you have a whole life? Where do you begin? I thought that I was beginning with writing, you know, my childhood, like growing up blue collar. And then suddenly I wasn't. And then I had this, I discovered that the parentheses around from which I wanted to write were these certain amount of years, but that my memories from childhood would blend in real time. They'd come into my piece. And so I could still use them, which is like, whew. Because I say all writing is good writing, but sometimes when you've written chapters and you just go, oh, I won't be using those for my memoir. Like, where will they go? Oh, shoot. So it is really about how you find the meaning. So exactly what Roland was saying. So you're not just sculpting what you experience, but you're also like, what did it mean to me? And I think that you discovered that it might have meant something less or more often when you're, turning it over, and over to look at it.
Okay, one last thing. So I'm going to assume there's some excitement about this kind of writing and maybe even exhilaration. sometimes, maybe release, but are there things that you automatically are writing, but you know it's not going in, but you need to write it anyway?
Mm.
I don't know if I
Yeah.
know 100%. I suspect, but yeah. So sorry, Suze.
Well, when I started writing about having issues with alcohol, I was writing about it in graphic detail, and I all of a sudden I just went, I hate this. This is just like, ugh. And then it came to me that I wasn't writing a confessional. I was writing about my experience, so I had to write it like that to get to this place of like, here. And I didn't shine it up because I think that that's the other thing that, today you'll see. It's hard to show yourself in a bad light. We want people to like us, especially if we're people pleaser, like they like me, they really like me. But if you're telling something that you didn't do well, or how do you tell something about somebody who didn't behave well in your life, and do it in a way that, you find the love when you can, and then you tell it with its raw honesty. And like Anne Lamott said, if people want you to write better about them, they should have behaved better. So, but yeah, what about you, Roland? Do you have something for that question or
I don't
no?
think so. No.
Okay. Oh, slacking on the job.
Slacking off.
Okay. So
Well, Dad, are we beginning?
we're
Yeah, let's
beginning with the
start.
reading portion of our memoir church.
I believe Suze Allen is going to begin with a piece from her upcoming memoir called Exploding Heart.
Thank you. This piece is called My Mother, My Antagonist. When I teach writing of any sort, playwriting, memoir, fiction, I stress the importance of the antagonist, that one who gets in our way, stops us, leads us down a path that is not ours. Having spent 57 years of my life underneath my mother's weight, I did not plan to spend freedom on writing about pushing her rock up a hill only to have it roll back down on top of me. When she died, I was there, all torturous 11 days of it, until the rock ascended or descended, if you believe that sort of thing. Her sister, Elaine, the overly born again, went back to her cultishness in the Adirondacks. Trish, her newest and only friend, trudged sadly back up to her own apartment. And I sat on my mother's twin bed and stared at her in the elevated hospital bed she died in, feeling, well, relieved. I called the hospice nurse who came to clean the body, as I swiftly came to refer to this woman who bore me. It was a quiet affair. Catherine, her nurse, so deftly moved the 270-pound dead weight around, reaching into crevices well on their way to decay and mopping up spilled bodily fluids with her gentle, clothed hand as I watched. She changed the body into a favored pink silk nightie. All of this action, full of serenity and loving care for a woman she never knew. When Beth Mary Allen, née Bucher, was propped up in her bed, white comforter smoothed and covered with the pink and purple hospice blanket made just for this moment, hands nestled on top of one another like a porcelain Buddha hand, Catherine reached for my mother's brush on the nightstand and turned to me with a subtle smile that posed a question. She held the brush out to me over my mother's body. I stood as an answer to her. Our four hands met over my mother's still heart as I took the black brush from her. Catherine nodded, released the brush, and quietly and respectfully exited the tiny death room. I hung in the air, gazing at my mother's vacated, clean body, and heard the front door whish open and pause and swish closed. The click of the door latch sounded like an explosion. And then silence. The silence of the dead. Not just the absence of noise, but of breath and rising and falling. more silent than the deafening quiet of the universe. A tiny moan involuntarily moved my lips with its sudden, unexpected hiccup. I brought the brush over my mother's head, now unmoving as a bust of her former self, her thin brown hair with only strands of gray, and I slowly raked the teeth of it over her hair for the final coif. I was delicate, the task taking on a sacred, less everyday-ish quality. My strokes mindful and caring in a way I had ceased to be with this mother who made me. And different than the escaped keen that eked into the room a moment ago, I spoke purposefully into the dead air, my voice strong and full of resolve. Our contract is finished. I am done. I did not consider there would be more to work out after I too walked out the door of this fetid room, letting the latch click into the empty room. Residuals. I sat back down and called the undertaker, answered questions like time of death, 11:25 a.m., cremation or burial, cremation, funeral insurance, no. And I found that there's a pauper's grave in Cornish, Maine. A scene took over my thoughts, me standing at the side of a deep hole, watching my mother's wrapped body unfurling in the air and dropping down, down, down. Snapping to, I found myself asking this man with the comforting voice if I could keep her here for a while. As long as you like, Mrs. Allen. Call me when you are ready. I am just down the road. I hung up, surprised at my request, but it seemed right. You really put me through it, Bethro, I sighed out loud, rubbed her rubbery arm, rested my hand on her flesh for the last time. When I turned to leave her bedside, the already bright sun seemed to intensify, holding me at the window in its hug of heavenly rays. I closed my eyes while a beam touched my cheek like a promise of better days. I pulled up the window to let her soul out, if she had one. Maybe it had already left. I imagine the dead do not need openings. And then I packed myself up. Everyone had already rummaged through her things, which were very few, while she lay unconscious. They had passed her belongings over her waning body, which didn't seem right, but I let it be. Less for me to take care of when all was said and done. I hadn't slept in 9 days, and I didn't want anything but a necklace made by my jeweler friend Deb that Bethro had bought when she lived with us in San Francisco. I took it because I liked it, not because it reminded me of my mother. I did not need reminding. I needed amnesia. Back in San Francisco, surprisingly, nothing had changed. I took back up with my perfect storm, a maelstrom of menopause, knee replacements, alcohol, back spasms, bad marriage, and a terrible knowing overtook me. Despite the now null and void contract with my dead mother, I could not get her out of me, off of me. An enormous amount of weight clung to my body, encased my heart, smothered my spirit. Alone and bereft, I searched for myself everywhere, but I could not find myself anywhere. I mean, anywhere. So like my mother before me, I set out to drink myself dead, to burn up whoever I had become, who I would never become, shrink myself to a pyre of embers, an urn of ash and cold. I sank into the cold earth, releasing into the rain and my inevitable end. Then a stirring within this pile of my remains, a spark, a voice like breathing. I want to live. And instantly I, the phoenix, I flew up into the airy essence, reunited with who I had been all along, only more so, resplendent, wiser, freer inside the bones of me. And still, my mother finds me in my writing. She, my eternal adversary. Different now, though. I turn her and over like a rock, a small stone, one I can carry and don't have to push up a mountain, one I can choose to set down and decide when to pick up again. I imagine once I am through with her as my antagonist, I can even let her go. Let her become like the memory of a breeze on Berwick Road on the chilly vernal equinox, when we were at balance point, equal light, equal darkness.
Beautiful.
Thank you.
Wow, that was great.
Thank you.
Oh,
We're going to put Roland up next, and then I'll join you for something less staggering. I promise. Okay, here we go. Roland, tech.
Okay. All right. So I'm just reading one very long piece. So, okay.
Very long.
Just buckle up. All right.
He's reading his whole memoir. I hope you have snacks and big drinks.
Oh, good. I'm glad there's snacks.
Yeah.
Okay. If I ever imagined I might contribute anything of value to the world as an artist, I have two remarkable women to thank for it. Well, besides Mom, of course. First, there was my piano teacher, Ruth Steinkraus Cohen, who could have been annoyed that her young piano student hadn't practiced his Mozart because he was too busy making up his own stuff, but instead took the opportunity to show me how to notate the music I was hearing in my head. And then in the fourth grade, I landed in Ms. Danielson's classroom, where a small table in the back of the room was designated writing corner, where it was understood that at any time of any school day, when any one of us felt moved to sit and write, we were invited to interrupt whatever the class was doing and decamp to that table. And just like that, I became a person who cared deeply about anything I put down on any page that I knew this woman was going to read. It is more than lucky that I crossed paths with these two before entering junior high school, because in junior high school, I would suddenly find myself under threat from bullies, gym teachers, and all the most popular girls and boys roaming the halls and stairwells and bathroom stalls in search of a target. And so it was in junior high that I began to perfect the art of fading into the background, of rendering myself invisible. The strategy had served me well until one day in 8th grade, during lunch period, my protective bubble of invisibility burst. It was a fall afternoon in the cafeteria of Coleytown Junior High when the din of lunch period chatter was abruptly brought to a standstill by the sound of Shannon Granger's fork rap-tap-tapping against a plastic tumbler. The whole room stilled. As one of the most popular girls at Coleytown Junior High, she had that kind of power. If Shannon had an announcement, everyone would quiet to hear it. With a voluptuous body one might expect to find on a 17-year-old, this 13-year-old cheerleader was rumored to have already lost her virginity to one of the popular jocks on the football team. I was not accustomed to being addressed by her. In fact, it would have surprised me to find that she even knew my name. Once the cafeteria had fallen to a hush, however, she fixed her gaze on me and asked, a little too loudly, "So, Roland, are you like a fag or something?" I was so stunned and humiliated by the question that I heard myself answering her taunt with all the sophistication of a 5-year-old. "No, are you?" She looked at me oddly, as though she couldn't quite believe she had uncovered someone so lame. While the general chorus of conspiratorial laughter slowly gave way to a return to lunch, I stewed in my shame, unable to finish what was left on my tray. I couldn't imagine what had prompted her to choose me for humiliation. We had never even spoken. And she had done it so publicly, so casually, as if the reward of the snickering and giggles of her boyfriend and his crew were enough to justify whatever shame she was stoking in me. No, are you? No, are you really, Roland? That's the best you could come up with? I punished myself for weeks with my own disbelief and disgust at my own apparent inability to summon up even one crumb of wit or cleverness or strength in the face of her crass and pretty lame attempt to make me the laughing stock. The humiliation of this moment was too great to ever share with my parents. By this time, I had learned how to evade my mother's cloying tendency to magnify every little injustice I might suffer at the hands of a cruel or unappreciating world. Keeping such sorrows private was far easier than enduring Mom's need to place me squarely on the biggest, most prominent cross she could muster. But something in my demeanor must have given something away, because it wasn't long after that my older sister brought up the possibility of me leaving town to attend boarding school. Do you think Roll might be happier in private school? Leora asked one night at the dinner table. And when my father turned my sister's question to me, I had no answer, because I didn't really know much about private schools. Once we started exploring possibilities, something began to shift in me, because at every one of the schools we visited, I was greeted with enthusiasm, curiosity, and respect. Mm-hmm. And when my parents started fielding phone calls from the director of admissions at Exeter just to see if there was anything more by way of information, questions answered, another visit maybe, that the academy could offer to convince your son that Exeter is the place for him, I had no choice but to consider the possibility that I might be more than an object of mockery for jocks and cheerleaders. I'm forever indebted to my sister, who didn't have to notice my suffering that year, but did, and might not have thought of a brilliant solution to the problem, but also did. With the knowledge as a 9th grader that as a 10th grader, I would be off to Exeter, I stopped worrying quite so hard what anyone at Coleytown thought of me. And miraculously, as though a switch had been flicked, my life at Coleytown Junior High started opening up. I wouldn't say that I was entirely comfortable being seen by the world, but I was cracking the door a bit with greater and greater frequency. The school choir performed a short choral piece I composed to a lyric by my sister Leora, and I wrote my first musical, which a group of friends and I performed at Town Hall. It was the beginning of an awakening in me that is still incomplete to this day, an acceptance of the artist's hunger to share work with the world. I don't remember how it came to pass that I decided to adapt one of my short piano pieces for orchestra, and then muster the audacity to imagine that the Coleytown Junior High School Orchestra might like to play it. But that was another very big thing I did in my last year at Coleytown. I was terrified to ask, and yet I managed to approach Dorothy Straub, the very stern, imposing violin teacher and conductor of our junior high school orchestra, in which I played trumpet. Excuse me, Ms. Straub. I hovered at a safe distance outside the door to her small office after orchestra practice one day. Yes, Roland, she asked, barely looking up from whatever papers she had been organizing on her desk. She was still standing, for I had followed her on the short walk from the band room to her office immediately after practice, but had been careful to keep a distance of several feet so as not to make myself a nuisance. Now that I had her attention, I suddenly struggled to find the right words. I was wondering, I have been working on this piece, a piece of my own, and I don't know, it's an orchestra piece. It's pretty short, but I was wondering, What piece? What do you mean? She didn't see where I was going with this, probably because there weren't any other kids writing music at Coleytown. Even I had only just started trying to put my musical ideas on paper, thanks to the generosity of Mrs. Cohen, my piano teacher. But Miss Straub didn't know that. In fact, Miss Straub hardly knew me at all. And that fact suddenly hit me like a heavy blanket as I stammered and struggled to make my request. Because after all, Miss Straub did lead the orchestra, but she was a string player. So that meant she knew the kids who played violin, viola, cello, but I played the trumpet. So I had my sectionals with the band teacher. Sure, I played in the orchestra, but I hardly knew Ms. Straub, and she intimidated me with her buttoned-up appearance and her efficient rehearsal style. She was fond of tapping her baton against her metal music stand to restore order. And in her view, order needed to be restored many times each hour. I've written a short orchestra piece, and I don't know if you'd even have time, but I wondered if you might be willing to take a look at it for me, just to maybe give me some pointers, since I don't play any string instruments or anything. I trailed off, fearing I had asked for too much. And then she paused from whatever organizing had been pulling her to hunch over her desk, and she straightened up, turned to face me, and said with a friendly openness I'd not seen in her ever before, "Sure, bring me the score and I'll take a look." Of course, I had it in my hands already and tried as best I could to hide it from her, not wanting to appear to have assumed anything. But orchestral manuscript paper is usually at least 15 inches high and cream-colored and kind of unmistakable, not the sort of thing a musician could mistake for, say, one's science notebook. She looked at the thick, oversized sheaf of heavy cream paper in my right hand, which gently brushed against my thigh. "Oh, what? Is that it there?" "Yeah." "Okay, leave it with me and I'll take a look. We can talk next week." "Okay." I relinquished it to her outstretched hand and noted with some anxiety the way she grabbed it and placed it on one corner of her cluttered desk without even pausing to examine it. I hovered, unsure of myself. Had I just made a terrible mistake? What if she lost it? Her desk really wasn't very organized. I guess I'd never even noticed that before. It was my only copy. Those 30 to 40 pages of oversized heavyweight music paper represented weeks of painstaking work. I'd been seated at the upright piano in our playroom, trying out harmonies with my fingers to see what I'd like the brass to do here or the violins there. I knew the tunes and harmonies inside and out, but how I wanted to adapt the ebb and flow of the music to the entire collection of instruments of the orchestra was a mystery to me. I was winging it. And so most of my choices in orchestration, well, they were experiments, and as such, not exactly committed to memory. I considered for a moment whether I should remind her that this was my only copy. But then, as she turned to face in my direction, her tight, familiar smile returned, and she said, "Okay." And I understood I'd just better skedaddle as quickly and quietly as humanly possible. I recall spending the next week or so in near agony, wondering whether she'd had a moment to take a look at it. Some days when I knew she was running a string sectional in the band room or having a smoke in the parking lot, I'd slow my walk down as I passed her open office door, squinting to see if I might be able to spot my score either exactly where I'd seen her place it or somehow move to another part of the room. But truthfully, I was too afraid of getting caught checking up on her to really slow my walk sufficiently. At the time, it did not occur to me that the door to Dorothy Straub's office happened to be less than 30 feet from the very spot where less than a year before I had endured Shannon's cafeteria stunt. This particular corner of the building now took on a more important meaning for me as I walked by that office door several times each day, trying to resist the urge to look. Sometimes I worried that she'd read the music and hated it, or lost it and wasn't sure how to break the news to me. I conjured and played out countless scenarios in my head, each of which might explain the unbearable silence, which had only lasted a few days, but to me felt like an eternity. And then one day, as we were filing out at the end of orchestra rehearsal, she looked up from her podium, almost as an afterthought, and said, Roland, I'd like us to try and play through your piece next week during practice, okay? Maybe Thursday? That'd be great, I said, hovering on the other side of her conductor's stand. Good, she said, and then returned her focus to gathering up her pile of scores. I lingered for a second before realizing that the conversation was done. And so I fled via the exit opposite the one I knew she used, so as not to suggest I expected any more from her. And that has been my unbreakable pattern ever since. Summon up the courage to take one bold step forward, then scurry for the exit just as fast as I can, hoping to evade one of my greatest fears in life, that I might one day be deemed a nuisance.
Wow.
Gorgeous, Roland. Oh my golly gosh.
Did she like the piece? Did they play it?
They played it and I learned a ton. It was a great experience.
You'll
Although
have
she
to read it in the
she
rest of his
shamed me
memoir.
a little bit. She shamed me a little bit about some mistakes that I made, but it was okay.
Yay.
Thank
So
you.
good. Oh my
you.
gosh. Thank you, Roland. Okay. And for one last piece, this is called My Father's Hands. When I tromp around in the wilds of my Maine childhood on Berwick Road in Agunquit, a name that means exactly what it is, a beautiful place by the sea, I come upon some soft places to land. My mind is mostly muzzy, slips of images, me scurrying children around, changing diapers, helping with dinner, those many times I was playing mom to my siblings. But like a Super 8 home movie, I watched these times, especially over and over again, when I was allowed to be a kid. A young, skinny girl who was kind and sweet and playful, so much so it breaks my older heart. Me riding my blue Schwinn bike, walking the dunes, lying on top of the moss in the woods across from my house when no one knew I was there. Rivulets of sensations, my long, thin, strawberry blonde hair being flung by the wind as I ran or rode my bike. The crunch of dead autumn leaves under my feet. The not quite hot enough sun of spring on my white freckled skin, goose-fleshed by this early chance to put on my purple halter bikini and try and get a tan. My feet being stung by the cold stream of winter melt. And whiffs of salt air, Mom's Shalimar, her Jean Nate, the sea air, mossy pine, petrichor, lilacs, and homemade baked goods emanating from our tiny formicad kitchen. Fall donuts made in an assembly line of 3 generations, me, Mom, and my meme. Plain, doughy, fresh, with bits of brown crunch on the outside. Donut holes dipped in chocolate or rolled in cinnamon sugar and eaten right away. Summer nights thick with mosquitoes, muggy with Maine humidity, and going to bed before dark, and hearing the other kids playing while my sister and I put our chins on the windowsill, hoping for a breeze. Swimming and swimming, Ogunquit Beach, Sebago Lake, picnic dinners at the Footbridge Beach so Dad could cool off after working in the hot bowels of Navy ships. Barbecues, camping, fire pits, itchy bug bites, sunburns, blisters, freshly picked corn on the cob, freshly picked Maine blueberries, freshly picked Maine strawberries, lobster bakes, s'mores. On Sunday rides, my father draped his arm around the back of my mother's seat, his hand resting lazily on the red leather behind her head, her hair swooped up in a French twist by hidden bobby pins. My parents singing Tora Lora Lora and Goodnight Irene together. and Kenny and Barbara yelling out for Dairy Queen as we catch sight of the soft serve shaped sign, and trying to eat the ice cream faster than it dripped from the cone onto our palms and down our arms. Watching my dad hold his chocolate cone with a palsy he has always had, my heart swelling in a way I could not explain. Hands weather-worn and ruddy, his gold wedding band buried in the folds of his left finger, barely visible. I worried it would cut off his circulation, but like most things, it didn't seem to bother him. His strength, his trade, his know-how, his common sense, all expressed through those overworked, calloused hands. The sight of them put me at ease. Dad could make anything, fix anything, lift everything. And the soft, supple skin he was gifted at birth did not last for long. Sent up to live up to Tatnick with his maternal grandparents, Hattie and George, to ease his mother's burden of 6 kids, one with major birth defects. At just 3 years old, Cedric was plowing the fields adjacent to the wind farm on a carriage hooked up to a rusty metal tiller, so's they could get the garden in. He wrung chickens' necks and plucked them, mucked out the red barn, shoveled, mowed, and repaired what ailed the place. He learned carpentry from his father, Walter, and Archie Littlefield. They hunted and trapped, ate venison, and sold pelts, served as caretakers for wealthy people's summer houses while they went off to warmer climes. At 17, Cedric shipped off with the Navy to World War II in Okinawa, working off trucks, loading and rigging ships. Back at home, he landed a job as a pipe fitter at the Naval Shipyard in Portsmouth, working as a carpenter on weekends as well. He was the definition of blue collar, broke, 6 kids, a ramshackle house, needing constant repair. Dad's mitts were rough, sun-stained, and dry. When he chucked your cheek or rubbed your arm, it felt like you were touched by a loving Brillo pad. After retiring from the Navy Yard, he bought a boat and lobstered, handling gaffers and ropes and oars and traps and overripe bait, his paws constantly drenched in seawater until they opened up, cracks with rivers of pus and blood. By now, his palsy was so bad, he drank his coffee and his Bud Light and eventually Coors Light with 2 hands. I fall into a memory. It's summer, early evening at the lake. My kiddos are fishing with their cousins, just me, Mom, and Dad around the fire pit for happy hour. Dad double fists his Coors Light. I stare lazily at his fingers folded around the can, which is dripping condensation. Dad's MPC joints just below his thumbs are very pronounced, consequently taking a hard left and a hard right in opposite directions. His fingertips are tapered, not fleshy, almost flat against the metal can. Their thick yellow nails cut below the nail bed line. There is no space between his fingers. Maybe a force of habit from measuring, sawing, hammering. I reach out to hold his hand after he sets his beer down and practically cut myself. Oh my God, Dad! Ow! Your hand is oozing. I put down my wine, reach for his other hand, and turn them both, palms up. Christ, you could drive a truck through these crevices, and they're blood raw. Dad shrugs in his ain't no big deal kind of way. Do they hurt? I asked, horrified. Out of the corner of my eye, I see Mom shake her head with a wry smile and take a pull off her Southern comfort. They don't not hurt. Dad was a Mainer through and through, and always a now don't get so worked up tone to his responses. I carefully release him and bend over to rummage in my bag for my Egyptian magic, a mixture of olive oil, beeswax, honey, bee pollen, propolis, and royal jelly. Dad, I swear by this stuff. Let me rub some into your hands. Whatever floats your boat. I pull my chair to face him, parallel to the fire. We sit knee to knee as I take a big glob of the magic from the square metal tub. I hold his right hand with both of mine and begin to massage the salve into the deep striations of cracked skin. The smell of beeswax and honey mix with the night air and wood smoke. The large dollop of salve sinks into his desiccated palms. Dad relaxes a bit into his lawn chair. Rubbing this elixir into my father's hand in the light of the campfire and rising moon is a most intimate act. My heart fills up and I get that choky feeling. The vulnerability, the peaceful service of the small loving act becomes as big as the night sky. My children's voices break my reverie. They're walking up the dirt road into camp with fishtails to tell us. I'll do your other hand tomorrow, I say quietly, looking into his almond-brown eyes. Okay, honey, thank you. His acceptance of my care illuminates something inside me. A way in, a path to showing him my love after so much damage. Bethro spent the night alternating, watching the fire and us, unusually quiet for her. I wrap this tiny gift up in a bow and take it into the tent with me. Every night for a week, I rub this balm on his work-weary hands. On my last day, after the last rub, before I head to the airport, Dad turns his hands palm up to survey them. Huh, they look better. I smile. Well, ain't that something, he says. Now you have a safe flight, honey. And with a tight, squeezed hug, off we go in our separate directions. But somehow the miles between us don't seem so far anymore.
Oh, that was really nice.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.